Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. We have such an interesting and necessary topic: forward thinking, adapting to the new reality, continuous professional development in ELT, with a great speaker that I'm very happy to introduce. Milton Bradbury is a senior teacher for adult courses at British Council, Mexico. He has been in ELT for over 10 years, working as a teacher trainer, and he's now working as an academic manager of adult courses. His main interests in ELT include technology, assessment, and teacher training. Transitioning to online and hybrid teaching has completely shaken up English language teaching. With the future of how education will continue to take place uncertain, it's important to reflect on what has been learned and consider how we intend to go forward as teachers. This webinar will focus on the new skills that are needed to teach remotely or a combination of an online and face-to-face. Technology will continue to play a central role in ELT, so we, educators, coordinators, and managers, need to modify the way we drive forward our continuous professional development by relying less on face-to-face training and courses. Speaking generally, there are also fewer CPD funding opportunities. This webinar will review different methods of developing teaching while on the job, such as online action research, teacher-led online training, and mentoring and coaching. Please note, there's a Q&A section. Feel free to send your questions via chat. So let me welcome Milton Bradbury.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Yolanda. And thank you very much, everyone who's joining this webinar today. Without further ado, I'll get started. So Yolanda, thank you very much for the introduction, but just very quickly, I'd like to just elaborate a little bit about who I am and what I do. As Yolanda said, I'm a senior teacher for adult courses in British Council, Mexico, in the Teaching Center. What does that mean? That means that I'm responsible for the quality of teaching for adult courses, for the management of our different types of courses and our different products, and supporting our teachers in delivering classes. So I play quite a central role in the quality of what we offer in our classes. And as Yolanda said, I'm a teacher. I still teach quite a lot. I'm a teacher trainer. I write materials. I'm a decision maker in my role. So that's me. These pictures just represent some of the things that I find interesting within ELT. The middle picture represents assessments. That's something that I focus a lot on at the moment, and obviously, of course, technology, which has become increasingly very important in the last year and a half. Okay, so what we'll be looking at today. In this webinar, we'll have a little reflection, and hopefully we'll be able to answer the question of what have we learnt about learning and teaching over COVID? How have we changed our learning and teaching? How have we adapted? What has been positive about these changes? What has been a challenge during these changes? And what can we learn from this to ensure that we continue? We don't forget what we've learned over this period of time. And secondly, the main focus of this webinar is taking all that into consideration. How can we, as educators, as teachers, and also as coordinators and managers, take greater control over our continuous professional development in this new reality of during COVID and post-COVID? Okay, so those are the main focuses for today. So let's begin. So what has happened in this past year and a half? Well, we've all had to adapt and react. Whether you're a teacher, a coordinator, a manager, a student, an adult student, a young learner student, it's been a very significant time of change. How have we had to adapt? Well, we've had to move everything online. Some of us have had to go back face to face. Many of us are teaching in some form of hybrid system, using both with some students online, learning remotely, and some students in the classroom. And that has had a significant impact on the way we teach and the way students learn. So how have students changed the way they learn? Well, based on kind of feedback that we see from our internal surveys and also from CUP surveys from Cambridge University Press, students feel that they have become more autonomous during this time over COVID. What does that mean? They've become more independent over their own learning, and they've become more capable of using digital tools and different platforms. And in many cases, many institutions, teachers and schools have had to rethink the way they do assessment. Of course, we can't, learning from home, we're not able to use, an exam paper with fill in the gap type questions. Many institutions will just replicate that by creating some form of complete the gap test, using an online survey or using something like Google Forms. But interestingly, many schools and institutions are thinking about how to change evaluate their students, how the way they change evaluate their students. So, for example, there's been a change of less discrete item testing. That means filling in the gap type tests. And we're starting to see more integrated assessments. What does that mean? Using different skills at the same time. So a type of evaluation where somebody has to both speak and listen, or both speak and write, which is positive because it's replicating real world activities. And another thing that we've been seeing in education is a wider acknowledgement of how important it is to focus on whether the objective is being reached and not so much the method of how that's being reached. What do I mean? We're moving away from this kind of one size fits all of testing and evaluating our students, and we're more focusing on the kind of competence of our students and whether they're able to, for example, deliver a presentation, not so much how have they put that presentation together. So these are all positives, well, mainly positives, of course. And it's quite interesting, but it hasn't been easy, as I'm sure everybody here can relate to. There have been challenges teaching remotely, and especially if you're teaching in some sort of hybrid system. One of the main challenges include kind of poor connection or technology issues. If you do have a poor internet connection, sometimes it's quite difficult to keep up with the class. So it constantly being dropped out of the class can be very frustrating. Not being able to participate because perhaps the audio is not clear. I think most of us will probably have experienced this at least once or twice during the pandemic, and unfortunately some of us have experienced that more than others. And what else has been challenging? The way we organise our time. A lot more time spent in front of the computer. Initially, I think a lot of us thought we would be saving a bit of time by not having to travel to work and being a bit more efficient with all our documents. But in fact, the way that teachers have to kind of adapt the way they teach to an online platform, and the way that students have to adapt the way they learn has inevitably actually increased overall time altogether spent in class. And the way we practice speaking is very, very important, of course, in English language teaching. This has proved to be a bit of a challenge in online classes of 20 plus students. It is quite difficult to find opportunities for all students to practice speaking. Of course, many platforms have some form of breakout room. But it's difficult for the teacher to monitor as easily as he or she would have done in a face-to-face class. So there have been challenges and there have been things we have to look at, but there have also been benefits. For example, as I mentioned before, we're getting clear feedback from students in both our internal surveys and also other surveys that we've been following, that in general, particularly teenage and adult students feel that they had more autonomy over their learning, they have more independence over it, they're able to make more decisions about the way they want to see their learning happen. Also, of course, this has been great for moving forward digital literacy and different digital skills. We've all had to learn how to use a wide range of digital tools within the classroom. Some of us have been a bit more experimental than others, but that's okay. But we've all had to move forward with that. The evidence shows that students are becoming more aware of their own progress as they become more autonomous and more capable of using different types of tools for their personal assessment, and this is very, very positive. We are seeing in many cases, perhaps not a greater rate of progress, but students becoming a bit more aware of their own process, and this is definitely a benefit. So I'd just like, before I move on to the next section of the talk, where I'll be talking about what the impact of this is when taken into consideration our own CPD, our own continuous professional development. I'd just like a quick moment to have a quick moment to talk about some of the most useful digital tools that we have been using in the British Council. I believe some of the links will be appearing in the chat at some point soon, if they haven't already. But if they're already there, I recommend that you save them for things like reviewing and consolidation. So kind of, little short quizzes and review and recycling language that has been taught in class. Some of the favourites at British Council Mexico Teaching Centre include Wordwall, Bamboozle, Quizzes. They're all quiz type applications which are run in slightly different ways. They're all very fun. We use these even in our internal meetings, so teachers love them just as much as students. I highly recommend, if you don't know them already, that you explore them. Speaking practice tools and giving feedback. Now I'll refer to these later on as I'm talking about continuous professional development, but some of the most successful tools in our teaching centre have been Flipgrid, Buckaroo, and desktop recorders. What do I mean by that is the desktop on your computer, so you can record you doing something on your computer, on your laptop, and your audio at the same time. Now this has been, these have been very, very, very useful in giving feedback on speaking or writing tests, or giving feedback in terms of progress, because they've allowed us as teachers to have communications with student outside of a class time, and give speaking kind of homework and activities to do outside of the classroom. So these have been a big success for us. And in terms of assessment, we've been using things like Edmodo, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms. They're all great. So if you're a bit stuck on perhaps a way of one of these approaches in terms of reviewing or speaking or giving feedback or assessment, please explore some of these. So just one final slide before we move on to kind of different career pathway, different professional development pathways, and how we can adapt to the new reality. I'd like to take this moment for you to share a couple of ideas. So what I've been talking about so far, of course, this is from my experience within British Council Mexico, and through some surveys that I've read from, we've been reading from CUP, from Cambridge University Press. But how does this compare with your experience in your context? What have been some of the challenges during this past year and a half in your context? What have been some of the success stories in your context? And what have you learnt over this past year and a half? So it's a lot of questions to answer, but maybe if you have an idea, if you've got something to share, this is a perfect moment to do so. So if you could please write something in the chat box, or I will pause on this slide for about a minute and a half. But I'd very much like to hear your experience. Okay. So it may be something, it could just be challenges if this experience has been very difficult for you. But if you have a success story, it would be great to hear. So Yolanda, have you got any comments?
Thank you. Yeah, Dominga Valenzuela says, I use Buckaroo with my students and they love it.
Fantastic.
And then also Sarah says, thanks for sharing all these tools. And let's wait for the other teachers to read.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm very happy to hear that teachers had success with Buckaroo. It's been a very big, very popular with our teachers. It's a great way of giving students a report. Buckaroo, if you haven't used it before, is an online audio recorder. And the benefit of it is that you don't have to download or upload any audio files. You literally just send a link. Why is that? What have we been doing with that? Well, instead of sending our students kind of written comments on their work or on their homework, we're sending them short audios of our feedback or of our comments. And how's this been beneficial? Well, it's a bit more personable. It's nice to receive an audio instead of a kind of formal report. And also, it's actually a time saver for many teachers. It's quicker to record something than it is to write something. So that's been successful for us too. Have there been any other comments?
Yes, Claudia Medina says, I've learned how to use several platforms that I'm planning on using even after we go back to face-to-face classes. Then we have another comment. Flipgrid is another great tool for audio discussions. Yeah. I have learned a lot. My students and me became more technological. We love exploring new tools.
Great.
One more. I found quizzes especially useful and encouraging for my students.
Excellent.
And you have some comments saying, thanks for sharing all these links. Another comment. I have seen an improvement on grammar structures and listening, but speaking has been limited.
Right.
Lourdes Reese says, I have found some of my students have a hard time when they participate. They don't want to speak. I learned how important my students' feelings are this last year. And then someone mentions quizzes again, being very useful. I have seen how important the differences between my students that depend a lot on their parents and access to their internet and electronic devices. Antonio says, I use Socrative, quizzes, and Padlet. They are very useful to switch the beat of the class. True. Voice pies work perfect for me to help the shy ones speak. Well, maybe here we have an answer for the previous teacher who said speaking is limited. And then one more comment. I have been using Bamboozle. It's a great tool to work with a complete group. In fact, my students said that they love what we did in class. Bamboozle, as well as the other apps, allows me as a teacher to use several methodologies. Do we have more time?
We have another, if there are some more comments, maybe another 30 seconds would be great.
I'll give you two more. Yeah. Most of my students don't have internet access, neither have a laptop. Most of the time I've been using WhatsApp as a tool to interact with them. But I think if you try hard and share your enthusiasm with them, you can have great results using different communication channels. And then someone else says, Edmodo is an excellent tool. And then we have some other comments that unfortunately we don't have time to read all of them. Thank you, Milton.
No, thank you very much, Yolanda. And it's so great to hear that this kind of positivity towards new digital tools and how they've been impacting the classroom, because it definitely is the future, or it's definitely a part of the future of English language teaching and in education, all education, in fact. So it's really important that we warm towards it and we accept, we use it to our benefit. And it's so great to hear some of your other ideas. Like Socrative is great, Padlet's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear some people have been using Flipgrid. It's really my favorite app at the moment. And it's thank you for sharing your challenges as well. I just want to say to the person who I'm sorry I can't remember your name, but the person who mentioned being with students who don't have access to a laptop, that is definitely a very big challenge in the kind of move to online and using more digital tools. Let me just say that I've been very careful with the links that I shared in the previous slide. All of them are mobile phone friendly, are cell phone friendly. So if you have some time, please explore them and consider how they may be used within your kind of, if you're still using cell phones in your education setting. Okay, but thank you very much. Let's move on. So what's really important for me at this stage is, how do we ensure that we do not lose this enthusiasm, this willingness to use technology? How do we ensure that we continue to develop as the kind of uncertain future comes? So how has this, for us as teachers, how has this impacted our professional development, our continuous professional development? Well, one of the things that's been very challenging is that learner and institutional needs keep changing. I realise that these won't be relevant to everybody. These are generalisations, of course, but for example, institutional requirements for assessment is changing quite a lot. Learner needs have been changing because they've needed to learn how to use online platforms and how to participate in hybrid classes. So this is still changing, quite regularly for many people. And to be honest, it looks like it's going to continue changing. So how do we ensure that we're developing over this time, and we're not losing what we're learning, and we are focusing our attention in the right direction? As mentioned in the abstract, in many schools there's been reduced funding for training due to the kind of economic crisis that has happened during COVID. So there's less, it may not be the case for everybody, but in many cases there's less funds to spend on sending teachers to face-to-face courses. So as I kind of mentioned before, the different modalities, we're not only focusing on continuous professional development for face-to-face, but also for remote and hybrid. So it's opened up a completely new world, really. And there's as there's less funding, as we kind of we're still learning how to react to the situation. There's a greater need now for a teacher to be responsible for his or her own continuous professional development, because it's very difficult from a manager perspective to predict what's going to happen and to look to the future for everyone's needs. And finally, this, as I mentioned before, one of the challenges for many people has been organising their personal time. So many people have found that there's been, they have less time to take a course, or less time to do something significant for their own professional development. So what is the future of CPD? At least the immediate future for the next few years is, in my opinion, it's more localized and more tailored. As I said, each kind of institution have different needs, and these needs are changing. Each kind of profile of students are specific, and in times of big change, it's difficult to find a one-size-fits-all standardized approach for teachers. So there needs to be a lot more kind of personalization of professional development pathways. It needs to be less reliant on funding. With a bit of luck, we'll have an economic boom at some point, but we cannot bet on that, can we? And either our professional development is going to need to be remote, or it's going to need to be easily adapted, as there is less opportunity to meet face-to-face for students. With a bit of luck, this may change, but we just don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So professional development needs to be flexible in terms of whether it's face-to-face or online. We also have, we've seen an explosion in the popularity of MOOCs. If you don't know what a MOOC is, these are massive online, I always forget the acronym, the abbreviation, but massive online courses. Massive online open courses. These have become much more popular. What are these? These are courses which are open, for example, with the British Council, we have a partnership with Teacherled. Huge courses in which there are unlimited spaces, and a lot of the work a lot of the work in these courses is done not online, not live, but in your own time. And as kind of as we are teaching, and we're finding that the way that we deliver our classes is changing. Of course, the result of this is quite a lot of extra work. So if we can find professional development pathways which are not very heavy on extra work, which allow us to learn on the job or to find some learning in something we're already doing, that would be great. So here are some pathways in a new reality. Now, I just want to clarify, these are not new professional development ideas, but these are very appropriate for this new reality, and they can be easily adapted to this new reality. And this is what I'll be talking about for the next 15 minutes. So I'll be talking about action research. I'll be talking about teacher-led training sessions and talking about mentoring and coaching. Okay, so let's begin with action research. So action research is basically what you can see in this diagram. It's identifying a problem. Now, this problem may be something related to your teaching. This problem may be something that you feel your students aren't learning for a particular reason. What action research is finding a solution to this through personal research, okay, through taking out certain steps to find a solution without necessarily relying on a paid course. So as you can see, we have the different steps here. There's a brainstorming step where you can think of possible solutions. You can discuss your ideas with your peers. You can amend your ideas based on that. Do a bit of reading. You can try something out in the classroom. You get some feedback from your students or from fellow teachers. You can present your findings. And now within within this framework, it can be a very, very rewarding and motivating process. So what are some of the benefits of action research? It puts students at the center of professional development, which ultimately, this is the most important thing, of course. It's engaging. Why is it engaging? Well, more often than not, when we conduct action research, we are in charge of what we would like to focus on. We decide based on something we've identified in our teaching. So it's something that we really want to develop in. It's something that we have a bit of ownership over and a bit of empowerment over, and we can choose how to focus on our learning. So that's very important in professional development. As it's based on a weakness we can see, it's relevant and it's targeted to specific things that are happening in our classroom. You know, many times when I've taken face-to-face courses, I've always found something useful in virtually everything I've taken, but sometimes they can be a little bit too general and not specific to what I need in my classroom. But in action research, as you have ownership over the project, it's very targeted to what you need. You can gain insights into your own practice, student learning, or dynamics, which is great. And you can use digital survey tools to find out if an activity is useful, is interesting for your students. The great thing about using these digital survey tools is that you can compile the data very easily. You can save them somewhere. You can take subsequent surveys and record the results very easily and very quickly in the same place. What's the benefit of this is that it's very easy to see. Well, it's easy to track progress or to track what you've improved in or what's not working. Quite more often than not, when I've handed out some sort of kind of feedback pieces of paper to students, these pieces of paper get lost. So it's nice. This kind of move to online is very, very positive for that. And this is, doing this kind of action research is great for your career development. When more often than not, when we conduct something like this, we discover something very interesting or useful, and it's great to then present what our findings in conferences such as Bbelt or journals, and this is very good for our kind of personal and professional development going through this cycle. So action research is something which works very well online, face-to-face, or in a hybrid system because it's very flexible. something that has worked very, very well for us in British Council Mexico are our teacher-led training sessions. So we have training sessions once a week, and one we found towards the beginning, near the beginning of COVID and the move online, that once our teachers had managed to kind of adapt to the new situation, we were finding it difficult as the academic team to really know what was useful for our teachers, because we were also, kind of learning ourselves at the same time. So it kind of almost felt like we were all on a on the same level, no matter who had more experience or more qualifications. So as we conducted kind of more action research projects, the outcomes from this were we encouraged our teachers to deliver training sessions online, of course, via Zoom or via Teams or via any platform that's available. And these have been very positive, because they've been very motivating for our teachers, and they've been led by those who are, so to speak, on the front line, experiencing how teaching is changing day to day, how learning is changing. And it's been great to, when we have had some funding for our teachers to go to courses. One thing that we've asked our teachers as a kind of a condition of funding courses and different conferences is for them to cascade their knowledge to the rest of the teaching centre. This has also been very, very useful experience for teachers. They've had the ability to go and take a course or to go to participate in a conference, and then doing some sort of summary or some sort of presentation of what they've learnt has been a very positive way of passing that learning on. And the other good thing about teacher-led training sessions is that as of course in any institution, teachers are at different there are different levels in their career. There are different stages. Teachers who lead training sessions who are quite early on in their career, that might be very useful for other teachers in a similar stage. Of course, it's going to be useful for teachers in every stage of their career, but we have different kind of we have more differentiated training sessions, which has been very good and very useful, and has targeted teachers at different stages of their career. And the kind of final thing I'd like to talk about is coaching versus mentoring. The way we see it, coaching and mentoring is slightly different. I just would like to have a very quick true or false activity with you. I'll show you the answers in about 2 minutes. Could you please write in the chat box, sorry, these should be bullet points, but for example, a coach needs to be an expert in the area being discussed. Do you think this is true, or do you think this is false? So for number 1, is that true or false? Could you write your ideas in the chat box for number 1? Number 2, is coaching and mentoring is the same? What do you think, true or false? If you think it's true, write true. If you think it's false, okay. How are they different? And finally, a coach focuses on the outcome, not the method. Please write your ideas in the chat box, true or false. What do you think? So 1, 2, and 3. Yolanda, are we getting some answers?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Teachers are thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah, no problem. That's fine. Think about it. Your experience of coaching versus mentoring. We're all here to.
Oh, yeah? Sorry, Milton. No. Annie Mata says true. Gabby says true. Claudia, true. Well, they don't mention if it's 1, 2, 3, or all of the above, but okay. They say true. Katia says yes. Annie Mata says false.
Ooh, okay.
Fabi Marin says number 1 is false. Okay. Blanca Velasquez, 1 is false, 2 not the same, 3 yes, focus on outcome.
Okay.
Alma, 1 is true. Fabi Marin, 2 is true. You won. 1 false, 2 false, 3 true.
Okay.
So we have a variety of answers here, Milton.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you very much, Yolanda. Let's have a look. First, before I show you the answers, I'm fully aware that different institutions and organisations will have may be using the terms coaching and mentoring in a slightly different way. But if we look at it from an academic's perspective, there is a difference. So a coach needs to be an expert in the area being discussed. False. Okay. Coaching should be done in an area the coach is competent or knowledgeable. However, the role of a coach is to encourage the teachers to find their own learning path by use of critical questioning. Okay. So sometimes I like to think of relating the idea of a coach to using a sports analogy. So if you have, some of the best football coaches in the world may not have been football players themselves, or maybe they were, but perhaps they weren't very good football players. But does that have an effect on their ability to coach? No, not necessarily. They're able to help their players through guidance of critical questioning. So coaching and mentoring is the same. False. A mentor is normally a colleague or a manager with more experience and knowledge, and specific advice is given, whereas a coach facilitates thinking processes to assist the individual. So a mentor is someone who should be more of an expert in the area being discussed at the very least, whereas a coach is somebody who encourages a discussion. And finally, a coach focuses on the outcome and not the method. Yeah, this is true. The client or the teacher or the coachee focuses on the method. The coach is helping you see the bigger picture. You, as the coachee, are focusing on how you get there. So I'd like to talk about a model which is quite popular in coaching. It's called the GROW model. It's an abbreviation, of course. So we have G, which stands for goal, excuse me, R, which stands for reality, O for options, and W for way forward. They may be different abbreviations, but this is the one that I've seen. And the idea is that in a coaching scenario, you may have two people. They could be peers, they could be manager and managee. They could be two people who are not actually exactly in the same industry. And the idea is to encourage discussion about an issue that someone may have. So the coach would be wise to have some questions ready. The coach can ask the person who needs some help. So, for example, if a teacher has a problem with their class in that, for example, they're not participating very well in online classes, they turn their camera off and they turn their microphone off. A coach may go through the coaching questions. So what are you aiming for in the short term, medium, long term? Well, in the short term, I hope my students talk a bit more. In the long term, I hope they turn their cameras on. Our coach will then go on to asking about the reality. What is your main concern? What have you done so far? What are the resources you have to help you? Then once the person being coached can identify some of the factors in the reality, they can then move on to what options they have. So do you know somebody who has been in a similar situation? Think of 5 possibilities you could try. And then the coach will help the coachee narrow into one of the options and choose something to choose some action points. It's in reality it's kind of supporting somebody create some goals, create some SMART goals, thinking of ways to think, because in many cases us as teachers we quite probably already have the answer, but it's perhaps it's difficult for us to see. Going through this process it may help us get there ourselves, and it's a useful kind of development process. Okay, so that's kind of coaching. What's the benefits of coaching? It's coachee focused, so it's very focused on the person who needs some support. it very clearly identifies actions to take. It can take a fairly short time and feel fairly informal. Sometimes when you're having discussions about issues in the classroom with your manager, it's quite normal to feel a little bit nervous or anxious. So you don't want to appear that you're not in control or it's not something you can handle. And the nice thing about coaching is that it's more of a discussion, and in no way are you being evaluated during this process. You should be open to discuss whatever you feel comfortable with. And the other thing which is very good about coaching is that it doesn't need to be hierarchical. So what does this mean? It doesn't need to be a manager with their managee. It can be, peers. It can be people in slightly different parts of the industry. So, for example, I've conducted a coaching activity with somebody who is predominantly a young learner teacher. I'm mainly an adult teacher, and my area of expertise is with teaching adults, and my colleague was with young learners, and we were able to kind of help guide each other through a few teaching problems we had, and it was very useful. So that's the benefit of it. It kind of takes a bit of a formality out of a lot of development discussions. It makes it more personable and more informal, and therefore more motivating. So I hope these different kind of continuous professional development pathways, ideas have been interesting for you. I hope, I imagine that many of you would have heard of these kind of ideas before, and perhaps in some way or another you're already using them, which is great if you are. What I'd like as a kind of final thought would be for you to consider how these ideas could be implemented in your circumstances. How could you perhaps do some action research? How could you perhaps get involved in some sort of coaching program in your institution? So think about the challenges that you might face. So for action research, maybe one challenge might be that you just don't feel you have enough time. A kind of solution to that would be do action research on something that you're already doing, something that not a completely new idea, something that you're already doing in your classroom and that you're not quite sure if you're doing it right. Evaluate it by going through this process, and it shouldn't create too much extra work. And if you have some successful CPD stories in your context, I would be very, very grateful if you could share them in the chat box. So when we come to the question and answer stage, which will happen in just a couple of minutes, I'd really like to hear some of them, and it'd be very good if you could share them with the other participants. Some of the best success stories that I've heard have come from all over Mexico. So please, if you have some positive continuous professional development stories over this past year and a half during COVID, please share them in the chat box if you can summarize it. Okay, so that's going to be it from me. Of course, I'm going to stick around for the question and answer, but thank you very, very much for joining me. I hope you found this useful and informative. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on Twitter. I'd be very happy to connect with you all. So thank you very much. And finally, I'd just like to just have a very quick mention about Bbelt. Bbelt is, of course, the British Council teaching conference that we have every year in February. The brightest and best in English language teaching. Next year, in 2022, the theme will be connecting teachers and empowering learners. And just to let you know that the call for papers is now open. So if you are currently in the middle of some sort of action research project, you have the perfect opportunity to present your learning in Bbelt. If you apply during for the call for papers, please do. That would be great. And also, if you're interested in just participating as joining as a participant, registration is now open until November. So it'll be great to see you all there. Bbelt's fantastic every year. So if you're interested, please explore that. Okay, And that's it from me. Thank you very much. Yolanda, if we can go to the Q&A, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you. Wow, Milton, you have given us tons of practical ideas to implement, and I want to invite the audience to make any final questions or comments as well. Let's see. Ramona Perez, let me tell you, Ramona Perez says, for me, I've been focused on my CPD, attending free webinars like this, so I don't spend money and keep learning.
Excellent.
Yes, sometimes the reason for not going to conferences is money to travel. Now, many of these events are online. There's an opportunity to participate more.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, let's see. And well, there are also some comments thanking you. And, you know, Milton, as I was listening to you, this question came to my mind. What are the benefits of conducting these CPD exercises remotely or by using technology?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, that's a very interesting question. For me personally, the biggest benefit of moving professional development activities online has been the ability to organize them in a more efficient way. So by being able to attend webinars online, recording them, or saving the link to them on a document or somewhere within my personal records, I'm able to save, for example, on a document, I'm able to save the video of a webinar. I'm able to save a table of progress in one of my classes. I'm able to save some notes that I've taken during the class. I'm able to save some feedback that I received from a learner. I'm able to organize all of this information, as it's all now digital, in a very organized way. And what's been the benefit of that is that I've really been able to see at what stage I heard something, or I discovered an idea, and I've been able to track the way I've used it in class, or the way I've tried to implement some solutions, and then I've also been able to kind of collate feedback from students, all in the same place, all in the same document, and that's been very motivating for me. And I've now got that saved, in the cloud for the rest of my life. I've got this evidence of this learning that I've been through, and that's just there, just filed away. And I really think that even if the kind of future of, even if we all do go back face to face, as we did before, if we can continue to record the learning that we're experiencing, the development that we're going through, and save it in one space, and be able to kind of look back on it and refer to it later, I think that's a very positive. Because if you're anything like me, when I've got folders and folders of papers from courses, and eventually they just get lost somewhere, but just on it's just so much easier to organize everything digitally. And so that's been one of the big benefits for me.
Thank you very much, Milton. You know what, Evelia says, I try to assist and learn everything about education. Juan, webinars like this one are a great chance for us to be updated. That's true. And someone else mentions it is always good to hear different ways to work, yeah, and enrich our experiences from all of us. Milton, how can we ensure that these CPD pathways do not take up a lot of time, since, we teachers are always busy, so how can we ensure that?
Well, yeah, that's a very, I'm very sympathetic to that question, let's say. Being a teacher is hard. We're under a lot of stress. We're the way that we're teaching is constantly changing, and we have a lot of work. We have to give feedback. We have to assess our students. We have to plan our lessons. It's a difficult job. It's an incredibly rewarding job, an enriching job, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. But it's hard. It's difficult, and we're very busy. So I think the idea of not, at least until we're able to have a bit more kind of control over our timetables, or at least we're kind of until we're able to have a bit more time to focus on more complex professional development pathways. as I was mentioning before, in kind of when I was talking about action research, let's focus on things that are already happening in your classroom. Focus on, if you can do an action research project on a digital tool that you've already been asked to use, or you're already using, or you know, something that you're already trying to include, that doesn't necessarily involve doing huge amounts of extra work. It's something that we're already doing. We're just formalizing the kind of learning process of how we become more accustomed to maybe the new approach, the new framework, the new tool, the new platform, the new activity, the new game. It's just kind of formalizing our learning process a bit. So we don't necessarily have to try something, you know, completely new and out of this world. We can focus on the things that we're already doing, and hopefully by doing that, we're not giving ourselves too much work, extra work, because you know, I know we're all busy. So that would be my suggestion to that.
Thank you very much, Milton.
Yeah.
One more question. How can we implement these CPD pathways with strict institutional restraints on our teaching and professional development processes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that I realise is something that affects a lot of people, not just in Mexico but around the world. Different schools, different institutions have different requirements in terms of, well, professional development, and also of the processes that happen in class. So, you know, for example, something like teacher-led training sessions, that would have to be in an institution where they were open to doing things like that. So that is something difficult to implement, and if the school that you work at or the institution you work for, you know, it's not part of their plan. But things like action research, the great thing about it is that it's really just down to the person delivering it, the person conducting it. You know, same with coaching. This can happen, you know, this can happen as part of your kind of homework as a teacher, you know. So, you know, when you're giving feedback, you include a question about this new idea. I don't think most institutions would mind if you're getting feedback on a certain activity you're doing, because it's showing a desire to understand, you know, their practices a bit better. So the good thing about action research and kind of coaching is that it doesn't really, there's not really a need to get institutional or school approval, because it's something that you're focusing on yourself, and it's something that you kind of do as within your own process of becoming a teacher, of learning about different activities as a teacher. So this is one of the benefits. This is why I wanted to kind of focus on these three ideas. Well, mainly the two ideas of coaching and action research, is because you know, you don't need really anybody's approval. It's not formal. It's managed by you as the learner, and you have complete say over what you do, which is more motivating and you know, ultimately important. So I hope that answers that.
Yeah, totally. Milton, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you very much for sharing your time and knowledge today with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And before we go, I have some important announcements. There will be some scholarships and discounts for our Bbelt, for our next Bbelt. So yes, please keep in touch with us. Check our website. And also remember to fill out the survey link you see here in the chat to get your certificates. We'd love to have you back in the next regional webinar. The links are posted also here in the chat to register. And please note, the live webinars in Mexico occur every third Thursday of the month. We have the invitation link in here, and you can also get access to the previous webinars recording. You can visit our site at britishcouncil.org. It's also here in the chat. Once again, thank you very much, Milton, for such an enriching webinar and sharing your time and knowledge with us this evening. On behalf of the British Council, I'd like to thank you all for being here and for your active participation. And let's once again give Milton Bradbury a virtual round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was very useful, and I hope to connect with many of you in the future.
Thank you.